Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me, I have Jide Ologun, legal practitioner and national development advocate. I'm Professor Anthony Kila, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. I'm still expecting Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Gentlemen, I've had two guests so far on the program. I'm still expecting a third guest, Professor Oyewale Tomori, on virology and issues associated therefrom. But we've had two guests so far. First, Otumba Dele Mahamudu, speaking to us about the election in Ghana with President John Dramani Mahama returning as president, almost as if we were in the United States. And then I had Associate Professor Ademide Adelusi Adeluye, who had written a book on Lagos, Imagine Lagos, from way back in 1845, linking to the 21st century in terms of the narratives about the city. And then here we are, two of you with me. Let me start with you, Professor Anthony Kila, to talk about Lagos and to also talk about the election in Ghana.
Well, we start from Lagos, we start from home. Imagine Lagos, I haven't read it, but I've gotten some good reviews. I look forward to reading it soon. But if I imagine Lagos, Lagos is a reservoir of a bit of everything Nigerian, the land of dreams for many and great expectations, but also a place, we must say, where a lot of people are still living in very below acceptable standards. A lot of history in Lagos, as the book must have said. There's a lot of things that happened in Lagos in the pre-colonial era that a lot of people, starting from Lagosians themselves, are not aware about, that I think it would be good to rediscover, not only the development, but also the battles and the struggles and the great ideas and, great movements that that Lagos have been able to give birth to as a hub of a lot of great things. The byline of Lagos as a center of excellence, I think is very appropriate. Not Lagos is exactly a center of excellence, but I think it's aspirational to be a center of excellence. I think Lagos is a good place of saying a lot has been done, but very much more needs to be done and can be done, quite frankly. But when you compare Lagos to the rest of Nigeria, you will see very clear developments. It is very possible, justifiable, and easy to see why people might say, well, it is so because they have X, Y, and Z. That is also very true. But it's also true that Lagos is a place that can inspire a lot more than it is inspiring, partly because others are not prone to inspiration, partly also, I think, because Lagos has not placed itself as a real trailblazer for the rest of the country. One thing I would say of Lagos, whatever you do, from the political and economic landscape, is when you compare the number of millionaires, well, I guess they're billionaires now, who live in Lagos, and the number of past governors who live in Lagos, it tells you that there is something there. So I would say to other citizens of Nigeria that Lagos is a place worth watching every given point. And I would say to Lagos elite that, to whom much is given, much is demanded as well, that a lot more needs to be done in Lagos, and it is possible to do a lot more in Lagos, while we acknowledge that a lot has been done. Well, Ghana, these days I've learned one thing, that you just have to respect democratic choices. And like Ghana, like America, like everywhere, I think right now what we need to be looking at, and people who need to be looking at themselves are those who call themselves analysts, starting from pollsters to opinion makers to those who try to predict. I think we need to start relooking at some of the models we're using, and perhaps to stop confusing intention with observation in what happens. And I think beyond who wins in the country, for those who are in the trade of analyzing things, the call to objectivity and sober reflection is a very important thing. I say this because a lot of people were seeing the Ghanaian election go another way rather than it has gone. And, you know, they were basing their reasoning, some talking about desire for change, some talking about tiredness, some scandals there, some failure there. But when we go to reality, this is what it is. So more than who was won or lost in Ghana, I'm very fascinated about the tools of observation. And it's a discussion I think will continue beyond today.
Mr. Ologun.
Thank you very much. Let me start from Ghana and from the fact that the candidate who did not win, though being the vice president of the present leader in Ghana, you know, made a very profound statement that he was conceding to the winner to promote the peaceful status of Ghana before the investors, to see Ghana as an environment where, despite all the challenges, you can still come around to invest. And again, I looked at the punctuations of the election and how electorates express themselves. Economy is crucial, the inflation in the land, the value of the currency, and of course, the drive for change, because one of the issues that really confronted Kofo is the fact that right now there's a $3 billion deal with IMF that resulted from debt defaults. And for Ghana, that is not something palatable right now. And Mahama leveraged on some of these gaps and looking out of the window at the fact that, oh, Donald Trump is returning to the White House on the platform of promising a better economy for the U.S. He has leveraged on it, and his past experiences as a former president who was voted out of office. And the people have expressed themselves, and I appreciate the fact that the opportunity was not there for the electoral bodies to manipulate the expressions of the citizens. And the citizens have declared, this is the man we want. And Mahama himself expressed the fact that that victory is emphatic. And then the loser also came out to say it was, you know, a decisive victory that the citizens have handed over. And my concern now is that, will he live up to expectations? Because even when he was the president, between 2012 and 2016, you know, there were issues of power failure, inflation, you know, despite the fact that he was reckoned to be an infrastructure developer in the land, you know, but there were reasons why he left office, and it only reflects what may generally be going through Africa now, that the situation has become worse than it was during his tenure. So who will reverse this? And talking about having a second chance, we've had our own share in the country. You know, the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, was once a military head of state. Many expected that when he returned to office, it would have been turning Nigeria to an El Dorado, which never happened. So Africa needs to learn, because if you look at Ghana as a nation, Ghana is favorably positioned as one of the biggest producers of cocoa, and when you talk of gold. But what do we do with the resources we have in Africa? So that is a big question. And congratulations that Ghanaians have preferred to allow peace than turn the whole process to a battle. And like I said, much is expected from the new winner. And I love the way you took Bob D up on his romance with Ghana. And he expressed himself that he loves that environment. And Ghana is a neighbor of Africa. Then coming to Nigeria now, imagine Lagos. There are several things to imagine about Lagos. I was telling someone today that I met an elderly man, and I asked him years ago, do you know where Alausa is, the governor's office? He said no, and I was shocked. You know, somewhere around the Keja. This man was living in Agege. And I said, what about Victoria Island? It sounded like as if Victoria Island was in Australia. I said, okay. Let me do you a favor, sir. Can we have a ride around Lagos? And that is one of the ways I've enjoyed myself in Lagos. Sometimes I do a 360-degree through Third Mainland Bridge back to the mainland by Eko Bridge. And even the tax reform bills that are before the National Assembly, you can see Lagos occupying a very special seat there as an environment profiled to be enjoying a lot of advantages because it is an economic hub in Nigeria. And I heard a wise man who said once that any community that is around the coastal region and is poor must go for deliverance. And so Lagos has been fortunate to have that early encounter with business activities, international business activities. And I agree with Prof that we can do better because if you move around this, imagine Lagos now, you see some elements that are trying to, disturb that profile of excellence. And I hope the government will rise up to the occasion. I had the privilege of visiting the Oba of Lagos, Obariwan Akiolu, and I was amazed when he was telling me the history of how Lagos moved from the Ebutemeta side to the Iga, Edugara, across the lagoon and things like that. So there are many things to really relish about Lagos. So it's very brilliant that someone has put this together. And Lagos is a land of opportunity. Many came into this Lagos dropping at the former Philip at Ketu and waiting for their relations to take them into Lagos. And today, they are multi-millionaires. So if you know where you are going in Lagos, the world will step aside for you. But then we have this issue of sustainability. How is Lagos managed? How can we cope with the challenges of the future, the security threats, and different kinds of vices we need to watch out for? And permit me particularly to speak about the activities of some, do I call them area boys? Because when I was with the Oba of Lagos then, he also narrated how he collaborated with the government to handle the menace of the area boys. But right now in Lagos, there are some guys who are really creating their own pseudo governments. Your car breaks down by the road, they impose their powers on you, demanding 75,000 and things like that. And I've had to rescue some victims from them. So we should not joke with the security of Lagos. And finally, on this, let me also commend Lagos for being a haven of peace. While this argument of reform tax is going on, a lot is being brought to the front burner in Nigeria, particularly talking about the impact of insecurity on the sub-nation's economy. And for majority of persons who are running away from bandits, Lagos has become a place where they hibernate. There are some local government chairmen who may only go to their states to pick up their allocations, and after that they are in VI or Ikoyi, hiding from bandits and things like that. So why don't all governors also look at Lagos? We want to talk about the BRT and many, but Lagos is still emerging. I was in Washington, D.C., near Capitol, and I saw a billboard that we are still building America. And I said, hey, at this stage, I wish you the best. So Lagos is on a journey, but that spirit of excellence must be sustained. And may I say, congratulations not just to the author, but to our amiable governor, Jide and his team for making Lagos what it is.
Yeah, say, make Lagos great again.
Greater.
Okay, greater. I get that emphasis. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Ologun. Let's take a short break now. Here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. When we return, the program will continue. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to This Day Live, a Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me on the program today, I have Jide Ologun, legal practitioner and national development advocate. Professor Anthony Kila, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies. And now, just joining us, Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Well, Professor Aworawo, welcome to, did they say the party? welcome to this, Now, quickly, We had two guests before your arrival. Dele Mahamudu in Ghana, a Mahama friend, talking about the latest development in Accra, Ghana, where President Mahama, President 2012 to 2017, has returned for a second term. He has been congratulated even ahead of the formal declaration of election results by Bawumia, his major opponent in the MPP. And then we had right down your alley, Associate Professor Ademide Adeluyi, who has written a book on Imagine Lagos using cartographic maps, working narratives, and then linking the past, the 19th century, to the present, and making projections about what the major issues are, about special narratives of a city called Lagos. I'd like to have your inputs.
Let me begin with Ademide's book. She's a friend. She's a prominent member of LSA, Lagos Studies Association, along with other scholars. We organized a conference together in 2017 when Lagos was 50. Lagos at 50, and it was very successful. It's interesting that there are still aspects of 19th century Lagos that scholars are studying and then expanding knowledge and contributing to the understanding of the city. There are several other works on 19th century Lagos. We have Victorian Lagos, Michael Chero. We have Marrying Well by Christine Mann. So aspects of social history of Lagos. It's a familiar terrain. We are happy that someone is combining, different sources, cartography, history, aspects of geography, urban development, to be able to make sense of 19th century Lagos. So it's an interesting work. It will be a good addition to the literature on Lagos because the dimension and the perspective she has adopted is quite different from what many other scholars have utilized. So a whole lot of things that from the comments that have been made about the book that she has contributed to the understanding of 19th century Lagos. I mean, basically, you can divide the history of Lagos in 19th century into two parts. The first part, 1800 to 1850, succession, disputes, and then the slave trade. And of course, Lagos prospered. Then the second half, from 1851, the British activities in Lagos. But of course, side by side, urban development, social development and all that. These are aspects that, Ademide has focused on, and we are happy that she's able to, bring out this book. The book by Christine, apart from the book, The Marrying Well by Christine Mann, there's another book, Lagos, the Making of an African City, where Christine Mann, examined the slave trade and claimed and asserts that the slave trade contributed to the rise of Lagos. That, in fact, the emergence of Lagos as a modern city began with its expansion and participation in the slave trade. But of course,
okay, Prof.
I know that.
I don't mean to distract your attention. Why is the 19th century so important? You recall that Michael J.C. Chero wrote a book titled Victorian Lagos, which was, 19th century Lagos. My own research was 19th century Anglo-Irish theater and modern Nigerian theater when I wrote my PhD thesis. In other words, in Nigeria, elsewhere, whether it's Ireland or elsewhere, the 19th century, Victorian, era was such a major attraction for scholars. And I can sit down here and just range over Irish literature, 19th century. Why was the 19th century so critical?
So critical because the Industrial Revolution began towards the end of the 18th century. By the 19th century, the impact of revolution had become, intense. And it affected social life. People now could live better. Standard of living grew. Salons expanded. Coffee shops also expanded. Prosperity generally. Then literature too, along that line. So that made the 19th century very important. And of course, for Africa, 19th century was a period of a transition from the slave trade to the so-called legitimate trade, because the Britain abolished slave trade in 1807 and vigorously pursued the abolition. And so West Africa generally in the 19th century, it was a century of transition in many respects. So whether for Europe, because of the impact of the Industrial Revolution and all of the social impacts it had, and of course for Africa, the slave trade leading to prosperity, and then they having to change to legitimate trade and these other influences, and of course colonial rule also. Victorian England, became visible in Nigeria, so to speak. Victorian Lagos actually began 1851, essentially more important 1861 when Lagos became a crown colony. Yeah, exactly. So the era that Ademide has chose to study is exciting.
Okay. And also because, Dr. Bati, it must be said that the Victorian era was also that era in which, as he said, when the outsiders were ahead.
Yeah.
When the closed circle of elites and those who managed ideas became expanded to more people with coffees and technology, so that readers became more and writers also became more. And the flavors of ideas also became more in that century, especially the second part.
Briefly on Ghana. The election in Ghana interests me a lot because it went smoothly. I'm happy for Ghanaians. There's a sense of relief, that because for the ordinary Ghanaian, there were many flashpoints already. People, getting ready for some violence and all that. But the position of the ruling party, accepting the results even before the final results were released, and then congratulating Mahama has doused tension. And we could also see that the kind of tension that we usually have here is not as high in Ghana. So there's a lot to learn. There should be something we should tell ourselves regarding elections. There shouldn't be a do or die thing. Yes, just look at election going on smoothly, and except the 2015 election where everybody expected some cataclysmic event.
But again, leadership, and one man came out to say, nobody's blood is worth.
Exactly, and that doused tension. That is more and more
leadership.
African leaders should imbibe that, and of course, us Nigerians, we should begin to see elections differently. And of course, I want to congratulate...
Starting from our leadership,
yes,
not us Nigerians.
Exactly.
Let's not do this gaslighting thing about the people. It is the leadership first.
Then the rest.
And then the rest.
Then I congratulate Mahama. He tried in 2000, he didn't succeed. And, he tried in 2020. He didn't succeed. 2016 and then 2020. And now, he succeeded. And he has Nigerian link. He's leading OFA for many years. He's even the chief of OFA. So we expect Nigerian-Ghanaian relations.
He's a Nigerian.
So we expect a momentum in Nigerian-Ghanaian relations. Yes.
A former Senate president, responding to the comparison between Nigeria and Ghana, said that Ghana is just about the size of Lagos State, which I did not feel comfortable with, because we are talking about system, not about population. Exactly.
No,
so if they have been able to come to the point where their electioneering processes is not like a semi-war, we should learn from them. And look at the ease and how it went. And then the winner saying to the person who didn't win that my brother has phoned to congratulate me. And so you can see that harmony and the intention to reposition Ghana, because that is the promise he has made.
I think the people who say things like Ghana is just a state in Nigeria, that kind of statement says more about them than the size. England is 4 times smaller than Nigeria. Is Nigeria not learning from it? What is the size of England that has ruled the world? Those are the kind of statements we need to...
Bawumia, the vice president, calling to concede. Yeah. I think that's a big lesson.
Yes. It's a big lesson,
in a country like Nigeria, where
Kamala Harris. You know.
Well, on the West African coast, where you people have over 200, they will say, "Oh, it's because I'm from this region."
Exactly.
That's why they
Well,
rigged the election.
Ghanaians overcame that decades ago, it must be said.
Wasn't it in the same Ghana that they beheaded people who ran the country aground?
Well,
Yes.
that was not all.
This era
But where they
started
come
in 2000
from?
actually.
Yes,
In
when
2000.
their first change, yes.
Smooth
And they've done
In
very
any
well.
case, well, thank you. Let's look at another subject. The Federal Ministry of Health says there's no evidence of new COVID variant XEC in Nigeria. The variant, first reported in Australia, has spread to 29 countries, raising alarm over its heightened virulence. In a statement on Saturday, Alabi Balogun, Deputy Director of Information and Public Relations at the Health Ministry, said Nigerians should not panic, but continue to take precautions by observing personal hygiene. He said the government has also taken precautionary measures by establishing molecular laboratories, isolation centers, and intensive care units equipped with ventilators at the federal tertiary hospitals. Now, we've been expecting Professor Oyewole Tomori, who has agreed to join us on the program for this conversation. But while still waiting for him, is the immediate past president of the Nigerian Academy of Science, and is a professor of virology. Well, if eventually he's able to join us, we would like to hear from him. But let's hear from the panel first. Professor Aworawo, I will start with you.
Well, we should be happy that the Ministry of Health is paying attention to what is happening globally and also focusing on, developments in Nigeria as far as that is concerned. It's also important, we should also be happy that they are putting in place, equipment to be able to test and then, be sure, not just make statements that borders on conjecture. That readiness is good. But while we hope that it doesn't come, measures that we need to take so that if it comes, it doesn't become, an epidemic, we should also be put in place. Advisories beyond what the information put out. I was just discussing with a couple of people not too long ago, and they are not even aware of, I say COVID. Is there anything, COVID? We forgot about COVID in 2020. That is it, because people are not aware. There's need for, more enlightenment, for people to be aware that this is happening somewhere else. There are chances it could come here. There are things we could do to prevent it from coming. And if it comes, there are measures we could take to minimize the spread. All of those specific information that we still need the ministry to put out so that, Nigerians can be safe from what is happening.
Mr. Ologun.
Yeah, I keep the enlightenment aspect, and I will request that the orientation agency, the national orientation agency, should be involved also. We need to build this culture of hygiene. It's very important. Whether an announcement is made about COVID returning or not, we should observe the hygiene protocol and let people be informed about all these issues. One of the reasons why Taiwan was able to effectively handle COVID-19 was that high level of awareness and enlightenment amongst the citizens. So that brought the cooperation of the government. So we should not just, even if we have been advised that it has not arrived in Nigeria, we shouldn't go to bed with that. So be prepared. A wise man said it never hurts to be prepared. And we appreciate the fact that the government is sensitizing the citizens early enough. So please, for the citizens, take all the necessary precautions.
Okay, before I ask you to comment on this public health challenge, I understand Professor Tomori is now with us. Professor Oyewole Tomori, thank you very much for joining us on This Is Live, this Sunday talk show. Prof, well...
It's my pleasure, Dr. Abachi.
Thank you very much indeed. We've been told that coronavirus, COVID-19 rather, is back in the form of what is called NCS, I guess, or is it XNS, and that there is no problem in Nigeria, even if over 29 countries of the world have been affected. Should we believe what the Federal Ministry of Health is telling us, or is there a challenge, truly, that Nigerians should take precautions? And what should those precautions be?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing to say that COVID never left us, so it's not that it's coming back. It's been there. It became endemic. We just abandoned and neglected it, that's all. It was there all along. And we knew sooner or later one variant was going to come out and cause what it's costing right now. So the XEC that we have found is actually a granddaughter of the Omicron, which came out in 2021. So, you know, we know, we have always known that it has not gone. It's endemic, and we're just seeing a new variant of it, which is causing more trouble. Not yet in Nigeria, according to the government, but when I read what the government said, my question was, are we actually testing? Are we testing? Are we checking? Do you remember the first time we discovered a variant was after Nigerians left here and went to Canada and other places. It was the Canadians that discovered this for us. I hope this will be the same again.
But do we have the capacity to monitor in case there is an emergence of prevalence in Nigeria, beyond the Minister of Health telling us, oh, don't worry, elo fọkàn balẹ̀, which is the major message from the government. Should we fọkàn balẹ̀?
The capacity is there. It is just that we're not making use of it. I mean, you remember when COVID came, Nigeria was supposed to build over 100 laboratories for COVID. Where are they? What are they doing now? Even before COVID finished, half of them were no longer testing. And I'm sure in the last few months, people have abandoned the testing. Government are not funding, they're not providing reagents to those places again. Maybe only NCDC and one or two other places are testing. And that's always the problem with us. We don't sustain what we have, and that's where we are. So when they say we don't have it in the country, it's not, I think it's because we're not testing, not because we don't have it. I will be shocked if it is not in this country already.
But experts have recommended monitoring, close monitoring. The African Union has also said so. What will you say to the Nigerian authorities, beyond just telling people that we do not have it here and people should not panic?
They should tell us how many samples they have tested and how many of them were negative. Those that are going to be being open. Don't tell me there's no problem. I've tested 800 and so far nothing. Don't tell me we have not found it. That's incomplete message to our people. They should be telling us what the NCDC has done, all the labs. We have tested 1,000 and we don't have any. Then we can believe what they're saying. But they say, don't worry, don't panic. It's a typical Nigerian style, which I don't think so. So let's ask NCDC, how many tests have they done of the ones they have done? How many are positive? How many are negative? Then we'll know whether we have it or we don't have it.
But Prof, could you provide us some enlightenment about this XEC variant and something that I saw in the British papers called norovirus? Because even in the United Kingdom and Wales, it's a major source of concern, and the effect that it could have on the NHS. More people are in the hospitals in the UK now. Now, what are the details about this variant?
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned, the mother of these variants we are seeing now is the Omicron variant, which came out in 2021, I think in India, and then spread around the world. But over the years now, new variants have been coming out of that Omicron. The one before this was the KP, the series of KP, KP1, KP2, KP3. Now we have this XEC, which has taken over. In fact, right now, as of November, about 38% of the cases reported globally is due to the XEC, while the KP3, all those ones, form about 47%. But right now, the XEC is actually taking over, and I'm sure by the end of December, we'll probably find it taking full charge. it is becoming a major problem in there because the winter is coming. So you're having more of this flu and other things all combined to make it as dangerous as it is in those parts of the world where they're talking. We don't have that flu. We have some flu here. Okay, we're not monitoring enough anyway, but our weather is not like their own. Therefore, we're not seeing the same major effect they are seeing over there. But I'm sure it's here. It's just that we're not testing for it. With the way our people travel in different directions, somebody must have brought him here. But I came back from Kigali 2 days ago, and the forms they were supposed to be filling, nobody's filling any form. The guys at the border are telling you, oh, you can go home and go and fill the form and return. And that was the reason. I said I was going to also report that to NCDC. What is the use of the forms if people are not following what needs to be done? And so when you turn around and say it is not a problem here, you don't have any evidence to back that statement.
Well, Prof, it's one thing for the Federal Ministry of Health, through the Minister, Ali Pache, to say, well, we don't have it yet in Nigeria. You know, people should just not panic. How about our borders? We have had crises with Ebola, with COVID, being transported into the country via the borders. And Nigeria is an open, welcoming country. What should be the challenge in that direction? Because you never know. Someone with the new COVID variant could come into Nigeria and then we'll be running a tasketa after assuring the public that we are not affected.
You see, to me, like you said, the minister has to assure our people that there's no problem. But again, we should back that up with evidence. As a scientist, I want to look for the evidence and say, yes, indeed, I'm more confident, there's no problem. But with the way we travel, with the cases going on in over 29 other countries to which Nigerians go to, with the mess, sorry to use the word, the mess we have at our gate, at our borders of entry, where, as I said, nobody is monitoring the forms we're filling. Anyway, it's a mess, what we're talking, all this form thing we're filling. And if our people are not testing, then we'll have a problem. We'll have a problem, you know. So my advice is we continue doing the testing that we're doing and also ensure that strict adherence to these forms are done. And also, I think NCDC should also be good enough to give the people a feedback. What have we gained from the forms we are filling? What is the advantage to the people? So when people know that this is of their own advantage, they will fill the form correctly. But you collect forms, you don't fill back what you are doing. So who cares about the forms? And that's what is happening to us.
Well, Prof, I heard you about government. What do you say to us, the ordinary people, about this thing that is, what the Yorubas call it, this dugbe, that is...
To the ordinary people, I would say the care that we were taking during COVID, we should continue to take it. COVID is not gone. COVID is not gone at all. So irrespective of what people are saying and say, oh, we've forgotten about it, abandon it. Don't. It's going to come in another form, and we better be ready for it. If I had my way, all those steps we were taking in before, we should be able to put them, people keeping their washing their hands, you know, keeping themselves clean, wearing masks if possible when you're in a large and crowded place. I would begin to wear my mask now if I go into a crowded place with what is going on in the world. It's better to be safe than dead.
Okay, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Tomori, Professor of Virology, for joining us on This Day Live, this Sunday talk show, on this new variant of COVID that everyone is concerned about. Let me come to you quickly, Professor Kila. Your comment.
Well, my comment, between Professor Tomori and the Minister of Health, as for me and my household, I'll follow Tomori's talk. Let us put it that way. And I would advise everybody.
You mean you don't trust government?
I didn't say I didn't. I just said I'll follow what Tomori says. That is what I would say, which is that we shall continue to wash our hands, keep distance where possible, and just know that this another virus might be out there. And I really want to thank you, Dr. Barton, and indeed Arise to bring someone like Professor Tomori to programs like this. He is the president of the Academy of Science in Nigeria, a body which I hold in a lot of deference, and I always use them as an example. And there are various bodies like that before the rest. Aworawo starts shaking his head at me now. There are also Academy of Nigeria. You are a fellow, aren't
just
you?
fine.
Yeah, you are a member. Yeah, we're all members.
Don't be fellow at some point.
Just
between your work.
And we, of course, we are members of the Academy of Letters. But I do think that, I say this because in a country where different strokes and serendipity makes the life of people, it is good to hold dear those aspects of our lives that are strictly on merit, on talent and knowledge, and not playing to the crowd, not anybody's luck or zone or godfatherism. The Academy of Science is one of them. I also think to this matter of COVID, he has said a lot of things. When we say enlightenment, which I think Mr. Ologun was saying before that is true. But we also need infrastructure. Now, Professor Tomori said this thing has been done, but they've not followed it up. Whoever is in charge should please follow it up. And I think it is time to also, if not an inquiry, at least some curiosity to say, what happened to all the things we built during COVID, or we're supposed to have built? What are we doing with them? Where are they now? So that we can continue leading that way. I stopped by this. There was a time somebody phoned from a foreign country to say, how are you guys doing with COVID in Nigeria? And somebody near me said, we've given it to God. God is now in charge of it in Nigeria. I think we, the people, need to do more as well.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kila. Let's go to South Korea. Supporters of South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol gathered outside Parliament on Saturday, hours ahead of a parliamentary vote set to decide his political fate. Yoon apologized earlier in the day for public anxiety caused by his short-lived attempt to impose martial law earlier this week. In a brief televised address, he said he will not shirk legal or political responsibility for the declaration and promised not to make another attempt to impose it. Lawmakers are set to vote on impeaching Yoon over his short-lived attempt to impose martial law after protests grew nationwide calling for his removal. But he survived the impeachment process. He's now his political party and leader of the political party saying, well, it looks like this man must go. But what we have seen in demonstration in South Korea is the power of the people. Even if he has survived impeachment, it seems clear that President Yoon will still be a lame duck president. He will not be able to take his processes, legislations through a parliament that is dominated by the opposition, even if he says that it is anti-state forces that have taken over that parliament. Let me start with you, Professor Aworawo.
Yeah, South Koreans will be wondering where you emerged from. Because I'm sure most South Koreans would think that a character like that no longer exists among their political leadership.
He lost parliamentary control in April.
Yes, he did. And in fact, his the rating now is like 13%. So what that means is that South Koreans have rejected him. In April, it was landslide for the opposition Democratic Party. His People's Power Party lost woefully. He's lame duck. And so he thought maybe he could just hang on to this martial law declaration to be able to rejig his control of government. And it backfired, extensively, we can see. People risked their lives, literally. When the martial law is declared, the military take charge. Rights are set aside. Parliament is set aside. Everything else is set aside apart from the military and the president. But the people came out, not minding what will happen to them. And they made their voices heard very clearly. With less than a day, people were able to gather in Parliament and then make that vote, which nullified the martial law. And the man, of course, hacking to what the Parliament had done and said, oh, the martial law had been suspended. He will go because even the chairman of his party has all but rejected him. And it is even surprising. He drew up a list of people to be arrested. And the list included the chairman of his own party. That's why I was saying that the South Koreans will be surprised that, where did this man come from? I'm even surprised that he survived. Because when you recall that in 2016, I think, President Park, It's just that they said one of her friends who was not a government official,
2016.
yes, was giving her, was giving her advice, and the woman was not recognized by the government, and she was removed and sent to jail. I'm surprised that Imam declared martial law. He's still, but he will go at some point. The earlier is made to step aside so that the political system can be reset.
300 seats in the South Korean parliament.
Yes.
They needed a majority of 200
to be able to get
the opposition party combined have a total of 192 seats.
Exactly.
But they could not get the 200
that required. But let me just make this point. South Korea has not had martial law in 44 years. 44 years.
The last time was 1962, I think.
No, 1980.
Yeah.
Yeah, 44 years they've not had martial law. And the last one they had, 200 people died. Martial law is like you throwing the place into chaos. Which is why, like I said before, South Koreans will be very surprised that a character like that still exists in their political leadership.
Mr. Ologun.
Let me pick it from the character level on a lighter mode. Maybe he's been having some conversation with North Korea. You know what operates in North Korea.
North Korea is celebrating.
Because the first question...
That their foe is having crisis.
I know,
Yes.
taking from the cue from the leadership of North Korea, when you talk about martial law, because when I read this story, my first question was, where did this come from? And, it's part of what we call power addiction. Because South Korea is one of the templates for this single term that Nigeria is some are trying to push in Nigeria. And obviously, he's likely to step down because even his party is telling him, you may survive the impeachment move, but you may have to resign, and step aside. And I commend the courage and the boldness of the citizens to come out and say, no, this is not what we want. And I hope that leadership will also learn from the fact that it comes to a point in life when the custodians of power, because we always say sovereignty belongs to the people, will be bold enough to rise up and challenge, just like what we have in Georgia, state of Georgia right now, that people are saying, let's engage the government irrespective of how you want to harass us. So I wish Yoon the best, but apparently it's not likely to survive stepping down, at least for the party to save their political head in this crisis.
Professor Kila?
Well, I think President Yoon is exhibiting most, if not all, the traits of a frail, failing dictatorship. What happens to dictators when they are totally failed and frail and failed? On the way out is that they lose a sense of reality, from Hitler to Mussolini, even to our own Abacha. All of a sudden, they're not aware that they're not popular in the country anymore because they listen to the echo chamber, they listen to themselves. And they always think people who do things are enemies of the state or they are enemies. They say conspiracy. That list Professor Aworawo was talking about, where the chairman of the party was there, it's simply because he saw the chairman as an enemy. He has lost the sense of who is saying what is right or wrong. And no, he's not that he's going, his days are very limited. I think he's actually gone. He's just holding to what he can hold on to. So we should just be waiting for his final exit.
Okay, let's go to South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement of a simplified visa process for Nigerian nationals has sparked a growing backlash in South Africa, with some citizens taking to social media to demand its resignation. The move, aimed at boosting economic and tourism activities, was announced during the 11th session of the South Africa Nigeria Binational Commission in Cape Town on December the 3rd. Critics have called for the reversal of the decision, accusing the government of prioritizing foreign relations over domestic concerns. The outcry has included an open letter to President Ramaphosa himself, as well as widespread criticism online. Open letter to the president and widespread criticism online. Well, before I go to the professors, let me start with you, Mr. Ologun.
I'm amazed that in Africa now, the sound resonates. The South Africans are saying, focus first on our local challenges and build capacity. And he also should have monitored. I mean, for those who keenly monitored the xenophobia and the crisis between Nigeria and South Africa, even recently the online crisis of taxi hailing and things like that, you should know that right now South Africans are not likely to take that in. But when leadership meets at their level, I doubt if they consider their citizens. And here the citizens are saying, no, don't go that way. And according to him, he's trying to strengthen the bilateral economic relationship with Nigeria. And the big question, what have been the benefits of this bilateral relationship to start with? So I advise African leaders to please prioritize and focus on what is needful. And what is it? Let me bring it back to Nigeria, the security and the welfare of the citizens. And by the time you do that, when you try to embark on your international relations campaigns, you find it easier than he is finding it now. So the citizens are right that, charity begins at home. So start it all here.
Professor Aworawo, South Africans say they don't want to see Nigerians in their country.
I disagree with Barrister Ologun.
Yeah.
The citizens are wrong. They are citizens who are not enlightened. They need to be taught. A few months ago, Nigeria, South Africa, the consulate in Lagos, Consul General, organized 30 years of Nigeria-South Africa relations. There is actually an agreement, Nigeria-South Africa agreement in cooperation, cooperation in the arts, Nollywood, and all of those things. Music, you have our music is booming. South Africans should benefit from it. Piano, what they call it, from South Africa. In Nigeria, all those cooperations that will lead to prosperity for even South Africans, but the agreement is not implemented. These are some of the things that this will take care of. Those people who are writing, they are unenlightened. These things will benefit them. It doesn't look, if Nigerians come to South Africa and the arts are expanded, the benefit, what will they lose? They will gain, Nigeria will gain. They are speaking from that, intense hatred, based on ignorance. They need to be educated. By the way, they did not contribute tremendously to their independence. Have they forgotten that quickly? These are things they need to, and Pan-Africanism too. So they are not people who are, the president is right, people are wrong. The people need to be educated that it is a win-win situation when all of these things are implemented.
Professor Kila?
Well, I think I see what Professor Aworawo says when he says that the people are wrong, the president is right. But it is the duty of the president and the leadership to enlighten the people. Where the people are not aware of things that will benefit them and they go against it, it is because they've not been educated about it, they've not been informed about it. If it is true that they actually benefit from it, because maybe they don't. Generally, people don't believe they benefit from presence of foreigners. There's a general, I think, misguided feeling towards it, but that's the thought. I think it's shallow, I think it's bigoted, but that is what most people feel. And it's a burden of leadership. There's a burden of leadership that I have been talking about for decades, that with all Nigeria did for South Africa, Nigeria did not manage it well. They did so much, walked away with no trace, of their bond with that country. We did not manage that relationship well, and I think it's coming to haunt us today. If Nigeria, after all they have done, I was going to say purported to have done, but they've done for the independence of South Africa, been engaged with it, and I know it is true because we have record of it. If Nigeria had managed the relationship better and had done not only on government level, on private level, academic level, art level, in a very visible way, that relationship will have changed by now. South Africans might be shallow and bigoted for their xenophobia, but I also think in terms of strategic management, Nigeria needs to act better.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Kila. I say you have been keeping Ademide Adelusi's book very close to you. Please don't take ownership of it.
Where is the camera?
Go and get your copy.
And you go and get my
copy. My own.
Was it signed?
It's signed.
It was signed for you.
My name
On
is
that note, I'll hand it over to you.
Please.
Thank you. Your book.
You get your copy.
I'll get my copy.
I know you like to read books. Thank you very much, Professor Kila. Thank you, Mr. Ologun, and thank you, Professor David Aworawo. I look forward to seeing you all next week. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.